Good evening, good evening, good evening. I am Rukak. This is Jam Day Warehouse, and today we are going to talk about my pet deck, Abzan Superlands. Now, this deck is a mid-range Abzan deck, white, black, and green. That is a Super Friends strategy with a touch of landfall. And this deck is trying to trade 1-for-1 early game so that we can play late game threats that can be 2-for-1, 3-for-1, 4-for-1, etc. We tend to lean towards a more controlling style. We can go aggro in certain situations, but for the most part, we're just trying to stabilize and then roll over our opponents with our threats that we ramped into that they cannot answer 1-for-1. With that said, let's get this started. So we have 3 copies of Shambling Ghast. Now, we want to play this turn 1 or 2, and we want to chump block so that our 1 mana turns into a Lotus Petal. A 1 mana Lotus Petal is still extremely powerful because it gives us that ritual ramp. We can play things 1 turn early, and if we can play our big haymakers a turn early, then that makes it to where we are usually going to be playing the more powerful cards on the board. The -1/-1 can come in handy every now and then, but way more often than not, we're just going to be creating a treasure token, even late game, so that we can do more of our big haymaker threats. We're playing 4 copies of Prosperous Innkeeper. This has 2 purposes. One, when another creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life, and when it enters the battlefield, we create a treasure token. We have to stabilize. And part of that is going to be getting some of our health back, because when we stabilize because of how slow we are, even with the ramp, we can sometimes be down 6, 8, 10, 12 life, and getting back 3 or 4 of it from one of these Prosperous Innkeepers can be the difference between us stabilizing and losing. And once again, that treasure token, we play this on turn 2, we can start playing our big threats as early as turn 3, consistently on turn 4. Very, very good card. Next, we have 4 copies of Borrowed Time. Now, this used to be 2 copies of Borrowed Time and 2 copies of Touch the Spirit Realm. And Touch is a very powerful card, has a lot of utility. It's Borrowed Time almost, as well as having the ability to channel at instant speed to exile something till end of turn. So, the problem with Touch the Spirit Realm is it is artifacts and creatures only, whereas Borrowed Time is any non-land permanent. So we want to get planeswalkers, we want to get enchantments. This is a very good card. And even though we can't cast it at instant speed, it's still just a catch-all answer, which makes it better than Touch the Spirit Realm in this deck in particular. We don't really play many creatures that we care about. We actively want our Shambling Ghast to die, and I believe the only other creature that we have in this deck that is not a token is the Prosperous Innkeeper, which once we get that treasure token and maybe 1 or 2 life, we don't really care what happens to it. It's not worth saving. So Touch the Spirit Realm often turned into 2 mana, instant speed, kill a token from a Starnheim Unleashed or something along those lines. It was not worth the spot in the deck when there are so many times that I would draw Touch the Spirit Realm and be like, man, if this was Borrowed Time, I could just stabilize here and then come back in this game. But I have Touch the Spirit Realm and it's not doing anything. So that's why we have this card. Next, we have the best win condition in our deck, in Felidar Retreat. Now, we can play this as early as turn 3, and if we do that, we can run away with the game. This card single-handedly makes it to where we can go wider than mono white strategies, we can go taller than mono green strategies, and our opponents have to answer our land drops when we're playing against control strategies. Just a very, very good card all around. So when a land enters the battlefield, we either make a 2/2 or we put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that we control, and those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. Now, the vigilance till end of turn makes it to where we can safely swing. We're probably going to have the bigger creatures, but we're also going to be lower on life because of how long it took us to stabilize. And so there will be times when you have creatures on board, but you can't attack because of the snapback would be too much. But having failed our retreat and giving everything a +1/+1 counter makes it to where we can swing out and force our opponents to answer our threat. Very good card. It is a cornerstone of this deck, and while it's not the only win condition, it will be the one you win with more than any other win condition in this deck. Next, we have Wandering Emperor. While this is not the most powerful creature, it has Planeswalker, it has the most utility in this deck. We can play it at instant speed to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature and give it first strike until end of turn. This can save some of our creatures on occasion. When we're attacking, for -1, we can create a 2/2 Vigilance token. That is another body, another threat that has to be dealt with. And if we go that route, we can potentially make 3 of these 2/2s if all we do is -1 every time. That's 6 power for 4 mana. That is a very efficient deal. And for -2, we can exile a tapped creature and gain 2 life. Now, both of these things are equally valuable in this deck because we need to stabilize. So getting that extra 2 life could be enough to help us stabilize. I have won many a game dropping down to 1 life and then coming back. Exiling a target tapped creature is very useful. It makes it to where we've at least 1-for-1 with this card, and we got some life in that 1-for-1. This is a very utility-based card, very, very good, but it's not the most powerful card in this deck by a long shot. But that's why we play 2 of her instead of a full play set. Next, we have Binding the Old Gods. We're playing a full play set of this. This card is perfect for this deck. It's a 2-for-1. It ramps us. It takes out the most. It buys us time. If we play Binding the Old Gods on turn 3, which is something that is a play line you can go down, and you take out their biggest thing that they played on their turn 3, then it's like we cast a Time Walk. And as we are a slower deck, we only have 7 cards in this deck that cost less than 3 mana. And I believe it's only 11 cards that cost less than 4. So buying us 1 turn makes it to where we can start throwing our haymakers over and over again. And being able to get the forest will ramp us into our haymakers. This is just a very efficient card. It is very powerful. We have to play the full play set. It is too good to be denied. Our next Planeswalker, we have Lolt the Spider Queen. This card is insanely powerful. It might be worth arguing that we do 3 Lolt and 1 Wandering Emperor. That is arguable. But 5 mana for 4 loyalty. -3 makes 2 2/1 tokens, which is what you're going to be doing nearly every time that you play this. Because when you play it, you're probably trying to stabilize. Make 2 2/1s, so we have bodies on the battlefield, threats, and we're representing 20% of their life total. So, after we make the 2/1s, though, all you're ever going to do with this card again is 0, draw a card, gain a life. 0, draw a card, lose a life. 0, draw a card, lose a life. Each one of our haymakers is a 2-for-1. So that draw a card is basically draw 2 threats. It is just exceptionally powerful in this deck in particular. You will never never use the -8, but that's perfectly fine. The other 2 modes are so vital to this deck that we don't actually care about the -8 on being on this. Next, we have Wrenn and 7, and this is why I've been tweaking this deck since Midnight Hunt dropped. Wrenn and 7 might be the most powerful Planeswalker in Standard right now, being 100% honest. Now, in our deck in particular, she can be overshadowed in certain matchups because she is only a 2-for-1, but she does get lands, which means if we have some other cards on the battlefield, like Felidar Retreat, then getting those lands might make it to where she's worth more than a 2-for-1, and then she becomes way more powerful and something that has to be dealt with immediately. So +1 is Mulch. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. All lands go to your hand, everything else goes to the graveyard. We don't care what we throw in the graveyard. We have so many haymakers. If we accidentally throw 1 or 2 in the graveyard, it doesn't really matter. The lands, on the other hand, we have to hit our land drops every turn. We want to hit multiple land drops. If we get that magical Mulch where we hit 4 lands and put them into our hand, and then next turn follow up with a 0 to drop them all on the battlefield with a Felidar Retreat or 2, then that can end games on the spot. As I said, for 0, any number of lands from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Very powerful ability, helps with the land drop. -3 makes a Treefolk creature token with reach, and this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. So that's just this token is how we go tall. If our opponents are playing mono green and they're building them, they got the 5 power, the 6 power, the 7 power. We play this. We play Wrenn and 7. Drop the Treefolk, maybe give it a counter or 2 from Felidar Retreat, play lands, use 0, buff this up quickly. This, and when we do a certain board wipe later, we can still have this on the battlefield to deal damage as a threat. This is just a very powerful card all around. You're never going to use the ultimate. We'll never say never, but very rarely you're going to use the ultimate. Mostly you're going to play it on the battlefield, go down to 2, plus it once, maybe twice, and then -3 again. And that's what you're going to be doing with this card. And if we make 2 of the Treefolk tokens on the battlefield, that's just ridiculous. Very quickly, we're going to just run away with that game. Next, we have 2 copies of Farewell. This is an extremely powerful board wipe. This can single-handedly stabilize us for 6 mana because it exiles all artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and graveyards. Everything that's threatening us immediately, with the exception of planeswalkers, this takes care of it. Just such a very good card. Now, we only play 2 because while we can play it as early as turn 4, if we have to naturally draw into the lands, we may never actually get a chance to cast this. But we still have a couple in hand as a emergency lever. Very powerful card, very good card, very efficient card in the current meta. Next, we have 4 copies of Storm the Festival. Now, this card is just straight broken in our deck. For 6 mana, we look at the top 5 cards of our library and put up to 2 permanents onto the battlefield. Does not say non-land. We can get 2 lands, which if you have some Felidar Retreat, that's just as good as getting threats. Maybe better because you didn't have to pay any mana for those, as well as being uncounterable. Although that may not be as big a deal with Storm the Festival. If your opponent could have countered it, they would have. And this also has flashback. So if we play this and we get, let's say, we miss and we play 2 lands, then in 2 turns we can play the flashback 10 mana and spin the wheel again. I've heard this compared to Collected Company, like the bad Collected Company. I have to disagree. I think this card is absolutely bonkers. And it is a cornerstone of our deck because it's able to go get all of our threats that are 2 for 1, 3 for 1, etc. This could simply be eroded to say, look at the top 5 cards of your library, put 4 threats into play. That's just how good this card can be. Even getting lands is just too good in this deck to be denied. Finally, we have Meathook Massacre. For 2 mana and X, all creatures get -1/-X till end of turn. Whenever a creature that you control dies, gain a life. Whenever a creature an opponent control dies, they lose a life. You can leverage this to stabilize a game as well as force your opponent to think about every attack and block that he does, because as you chump block each one of those 2/1s that you had that died, they have to take a damage for it, and it just slowly chips away. And while we're doing all the other things that we're doing, just exceptional card. And we played 2 of this and 2 of Farewell for the versatility. That's why we didn't choose one or the other. Which brings us to our lands, and we're going to start with Iganjo, Seat of the Empire. Very, very good card. 97% of the time, this is just a plains. But the other 3% of the time, it's saving your ass by killing some random 4 toughness creature. It is just insane. And the fact that it enters the battlefield untapped makes this a free roll. So just a very good card in this deck, especially if we are in a situation where we can take out an old growth troll or something like that that's attacking us for the cost of a land drop. Now we have 1 plains, 1 swamp, 3 forests, because green is our core color. We can storm the festival and hit some of the 5 mana stuff if we don't have black or white, but we can't use black or white in order to get green. So green is the core color in this deck, and that's why we have 3 forests instead of some other combination. Next, we have Takanuma, Abandoned Mire, and once again, 97% of the time, it's a swamp. But the other 3% of the time, if your opponent just wasted 2 or 3 cards to try and get rid of Wrenn and 7, and then you channel Takanuma at the end of their turn to get your Wrenn and 7 back, I have seen many a game ended on the spot because use the Takanuma channel to go and get that Wrenn and 7 or that Lolt back. Very, very good utility land. And we have Boseiju Who Endures. This card can destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-land spell. The last one is something that a lot of people forget about. It exiles non-land, non-basic lands, and a lot of people forget that. Once again, 97%, or actually this is a little bit different. This is more like 80% of the time it's going to enter the battlefield as a land, 20% of the time it's going to take out something pesky to buy us time to start swinging our haymakers. Just a very, very good card. We have 4 Bright Climb pathways. You only need 1 or 2 white pips. So once you have your one white pip and you're trying to figure out what to build to in terms of the mana base, you're probably going to be playing Grim Climb Pathway, which is very having this flexibility is what makes this card good, because we do want to have white, and on occasion we want to have 2 white. But usually once we have 1 or 2 white, we don't want to see any white again. So we're splashing in. After you have your 1 or 2 white, just dropping Grim Climb Pathways over the white will help stabilize your mana. We have 4 Darkboar because both green and black are our 2 most important colors. So being able to have access to either one of them on one card, very, very useful. Next, we have something a little bit strange. We have Woodland Chasm. Enters the battlefield tapped, and then we can get black or green, our core colors. Arctic Treeline gets green or white. And you could argue that maybe we should be playing the Gain Life dual lands over these, but Binding the Old Gods can come and find these cards because they are forests. And anything that Binding the Old Gods brings into play comes into play tapped either way. So being able to go out and get a dual land that was going to enter the battlefield whether we met a condition or not, it's just very powerful fixing. 1 Branchloft Pathway. Green is the most important color. White is the least important color. But being able to splash in so that we can get our colors on time is why we have this as a one of. Just white in a pinch, green more often than not. Then we have a play set of Overgrown Farmland. Now this, on the other hand, is a very surprising one, because you have to wait until you have 2 lands or more. Which are not Overgrown. The copy of Overgrown Farmland that you're playing when you play it, in order for it to enter untapped. Well, we're going to be waiting till the late game anyway, so it's not really going to affect us too much that we might have to wait until turn 3 or turn 2 to have played it and have it available for use. More often than not, it's just a dual land. Very good card in this deck. And finally, we have Evolving Wilds. This helps out with our life game, our landfall strategies by being able to play Evolving Wilds, crack it, go get a basic. If we have a Felidar or 2, then once again, the game starts running away in a hurry. Just very synergistic to this deck. And that's it. We do not have a sideboard because this is best of 1. But I have been winning very consistently on Arena with this deck. But yes, that is my Abzan Superlands deck. Be sure to tell me what you think. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you think I'm a crazy taco man living in a basement? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We're still aiming for 50 as soon as possible. And as soon as we do, we are streaming on YouTube every day. So you can watch me play Arena poorly while we talk about finances. Well, I'm Rukak. This is Jam Day Warehouse. And peace the fuck out.